Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in to the Rice Crypto Show. I am your host, Chris Rice Crypto. And in today's episode, I have an awesome interview with Lynette Zang, who is the Chief Marketing Analyst of ITM Trading. Now, she's been a banker, a stockbroker, and studied world currencies since 1987. She believes strongly that we need to be independent as possible. And at the same time, we need to come together in community in order to survive and thrive through the hyperinflation she sees coming in the near future. Now, this will be my third interview with Lynette Zang, and her motto, which I love very much, is food, water, energy, security, community, barterability, and wealth preservation. If you haven't checked out my first two interviews with Lynette, I encourage you to explore my channel. But without further ado, we're going to get into today's episode. All right, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, today we are joined by Lynette Zang. Lynette, I appreciate you joining me today. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm so happy for you to have me. Thank you so much. I'm doing great.
I know you've had a really crazy day. You just got done doing that live Q&A, which is awesome. I do encourage people to check out your videos, your content. You do have a YouTube channel as well if people are unfamiliar with who you are. And you've got some really great recent interviews with people like Jim Rickards, Greg Manarino. I love the interview you did with Stefan Molyneux.
Oh, yes.
SGT, X22. I mean, you're all over the place in addition to your own content. So for anybody viewing this not familiar with Lynette Zang, I'm going to have links down below so you can check out her YouTube channel at ITM Trading. But Lynette, do you mind giving everybody, because this is my third time interviewing you, but it's been over a year. Do you mind kind of giving everybody a little bit of a quick background about who you are?
Oh, I'm happy to do that because actually I've been in this industry since on some level, different levels, but since 1964. My uncle was a major antique dealer, so I learned how tangibles, the trend in tangibles. I was a banker, I was a stockbroker, and I've been here for, well, I can't, hard to believe, but 17 years. So I am all about the monetary system, and my personal mission is to translate financial noise, which is intentionally made complex and opaque so that you have no idea what's going on, but you need to know so that you can make educated choices. And that's what my work is all about, and our work here at ITM Trading.
And I think it's great. I mean, I did mention in the intro, you've been a banker, a stockbroker, you studied world currency since 1987. And I've been following you personally for over a couple of years, like close to 3 years. And I really enjoy what you do. And that's the reason why I wanted to bring you back, because when you talk about translating this noise to simplify things for some people, because there's a lot of people that don't really grasp what's really truly going on. And you do a really great job at simplifying that. So while you and I don't always agree on everything, I know that we both agree that our global economic system is in trouble and we're on the verge of a collapse.
Absolutely. And we're in the middle of transitioning into a new system already.
Oh, I agree. And you talk a lot about this, a global economic reset or a great reset.
Yes.
How did we get here? Like, how do we arrive at this place in time?
Wow. Well, we handed over control to corporate bankers. And what do bankers know? They know debt and they know leverage. And so the current system, it's been, while it evolved from 1913 to 1971 to being pure fiat, since when Nixon closed the gold window, which is the way they like to say it because it sounds pretty harmless.
The Nixon shock?
Yeah, the Nixon shock. What he actually did was hand over full control of inflation to private central bankers. And again, all they know is debt and leverage. That's how money is created in our system. And I find that most people don't really understand money, but it is what you're willing to work for. You use it as your tool of barter because at this point, you have, the dollar can never go away. You have confidence in the dollar, even though your personal experience with prices on everything you've done over your lifetime going up and up and up, you can't imagine that it's going away, when in reality, it is. It's lost like 98% of its purchasing power value since the banks have been in control. And that purchasing power value has transferred to the elite, to those bankers and to everybody around them, and away from you and me.
Oh, I totally agree.
That's how we got here. We gave it to the bankers. Here,
since you mentioned something about people not really understanding what money is, and somebody who I like to encourage people to check out, Mike Maloney and his Hidden Secrets of Money series. But in your words, what is the difference between money and currency?
Well, currency is like an offshoot. So you have physical dollars, $10, $100, etc. But money is really a tool to value and store your labor. And initially, we needed to be able to specialize so that you didn't have to go out, shear the lamb, make the wool, do the fabric, sew the cloth, bake your bread, right? So we needed a way to allow people to specialize, and money allowed that to do it. So when we were on the gold standard, you were actually trading your labor for somebody else's labor, which is pretty fair. But that's what money is. And the most important function is to hold that value over time. So if you saved it for when you, retire, that you're still being fairly paid for your labor. The problem for governments, though, is when they wanted to tax and spend, that's highly visible. So inflation, we transitioned into a fiat system, and fiat means by decree. So bottom line, that's government money. And its most important function is inflation. And listen to the central banks these days. We need more inflation. We need more inflation, because that is an almost invisible tax on your wealth. And guess what? That tax does not need to be legislated. And I'm old enough to remember when inflation was a dirty word. Now they want you to believe that it'll save you.
Well, see,
the currency has no value, the dollars in this country.
I was kind of raised to think, especially with our education system, that these kind of are boring subjects, that just put me to sleep thinking about what is inflation. But once I started getting involved in things like cryptocurrency and started studying the fundamentals of precious metals and things like that, I started understanding this a lot more. And one thing that I'd love for you to explain to people exactly is, what is inflation and how has it affected the U.S. dollar since 1913 with the creation of the Fed, up until the 70s with the Nixon shock until now?
Well, really simply put, inflation is a devaluation, and that goes back to the currency of dollars, so that it forces you to use more and more of those dollars to buy the same goods and services. But again, it's like an almost invisible tax, because whoever gets those dollars first has them when they have the most value to buy stuff. So if you kind of think of it like a wheel, where the central banks are in the middle and they're the ones that create the money by pushing buttons, okay? And then the banks, the corporate banks, are the closest to them, then the government, then the other corporations, and the public, you and I, are the furthest away from that center. So by the time we get that money, it has lost quite a bit of its value. But having said that, the moment you get it into your hand, it has the most value that it will in the rest of its lifetime. And it's really, for governments, it's that invisible tax. For corporations, it causes, inflation causes what's called nominal confusion. So for example, if you had a $20 bill 20 years ago and you have a $20 bill today, Nominally, it's exactly the same. It's a $20 bill. But what that bill would buy you 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, a year ago, and what it will buy you today is much, much less.
Right.
So, right. So for corporations, that nominal confusion is really a benefit because they'll give the average worker a raise, but since it's their products that they gauge inflation by, that raise by design never keeps up with inflation. So, for example, in 1971, the average wage was $9,600, and a family of four could live on that with one wage earner.
Right.
Today, the average wage, I think, is something like 56,000, and you got to have both wage earners, and you're still, most Americans can't put $500 together in an emergency.
No.
Exactly. But what have we seen? We've seen that the guys at the top of the corporate heap are making what, 3,000 times what the average worker makes in some companies. In the 70s, it was 20 times. Okay. But today, it's a ridiculous amount. So all that wealth has floated to the top. We are not better off. We are actually fiscally a lot worse off, but we don't know it because, hey, you'd go, whoa, I'd rather make 56,000 than 9,600. But that's because of that nominal confusion. Are we really doing better? We have a lot more debt than we had in 71 as individuals, just trying to maintain that standard of living. And we've been taught debt is a good thing to have. But I'm pretty sure that any of your viewers that are struggling with credit card debt, student loans, auto loans, all of that stuff, yeah, they might not agree with that. And I certainly don't. It just makes you a slave, a debt slave to the bank.
Oh, I would totally agree with that. Totally agree. And this is like some people that don't realize is like, you know, back in like early 30s, you could take a $20 bill and get it and transfer it for an ounce of gold. And now an ounce of gold is going for, from last I looked, over $1,400 an ounce. Yeah. So, and that's showing the purchasing power of the store of value of the money of owning gold versus the currency.
Exactly.
It kind of goes against that, the money versus currency. So with the currency, now that we have currency in play, and that's what people believe has value because we trust the government, and this is backed by the trust of the government. We've lost, what, 96% purchasing power on the dollar bill?
More than that. And this is official, which means it's probably worse. But we are well below 4 cents out of the original dollar's worth of purchasing power. And a big chunk of that just since 1971 when Nixon handed it over to those bankers.
Yeah. And you do some really awesome videos too about what we're talking about. I just wanted to kind of like summarize a little bit of your work into this interview. And I do encourage people to check out because your graphs you put together, I even saved to show people, because you do just such a great job explaining things.
Oh, thank you. I try. I keep trying to get better and better and better at it. It is my mission.
Do you think that the possibility of a gold-backed currency could help the U.S. Economy recover in any fashion? And do you see a gold-backed currency existing? And do you see people ending the use of federal notes?
Oh, well, there's a couple questions in there. Number one, my bet would be that we will always have some kind of currency called the dollar, because that's what people believe. You're right. We've been taught to have the dollar. But what history tells us is that the way that when you cannot pay your bills, the way a nation declares bankruptcy, besides saying, no, we're not going to repay, we're not going to pay those bonds, is they hyperinflate their currency. All confidence in the currency as well as the financial system is lost. Then governments have to do something to get you to trust the currency again, or you're not going to use it and they've lost control. So typically that's when they put gold back into the equation. I'm 100, I mean, it's happened over 4,800 times. So could this time be different? Well, I mean, that's not within my control. However, history has a tendency to repeat itself. And even though we've been trained not to think of gold as money, but as a relic, well, I'd ask, why are the central banks accumulating as much as they can hand over fist, which they've been doing admittedly since 2008? It's because what the whole point is to hold, as you said, your purchasing power. So yes, I do think that we will see a gold-backed currency. Now, I'm not saying 100%, although, you know, I mean, a lot of people will say, oh, well, there's just not enough gold out there to do that. Well, that's not really true. It is the price, the fiat money price of that gold would determine what that backing was. So, for example, you know, we've had a reset in the US a few times. We had it in 1933, where gold went from $20 an ounce to 35. We had it again in 1970, well, it was actually before 71, I think it was 68, where it went from 35 to 42.22, which is where the official US price of gold is right now. And if they were to do the reset today, the minimum, and you know, I mean, this isn't just pulling numbers out of the air. It's based on the amount of money that they've pushed into the system and the amount of physical gold that exists. We would have to see gold easily north of $10,000 an ounce, and really probably closer to 50 at this point. And if they were going to back the currency, maybe in terms of the fiat, it would be even higher. But what people also have to understand is that when that happens, what it really means is the dollars have no value.
Right. See, yeah, and that's
right.
That whole thing was explained to me by an older gentleman who actually has a pawn shop that sells precious metals as well. About when you're buying things like gold and silver, you're not really looking at it for a monetary gain. You're looking at it to keep what you have as what you have, because our system, being a debt-based system, is definitely designed for us, as we save money, to lose purchasing power of the money that we save. Whereas we could buy more when we first have it in our hands versus putting it in the bank and getting out in a couple of years.
Right.
Which is crazy. Now, do you think, because a lot of people aren't even aware of this, when you talked about the price of the nominal price of gold going from $20.67 per ounce to $35, the reason for that was that FDR's 1933 gold confiscation, that was a bailout for the Federal Reserve, where they made the executive order outlawing the private ownership of gold, which was unconstitutional as well. And they were forcing individuals to sell to the Treasury for that nominal price of $20.67 per ounce. But then once the change of gold transferred hands and the United States citizens are no longer allowed to own it, then the price of gold was then changed to $35 an ounce.
Right. And actually, I will say this too, based upon the amount of new paper, this was an early form of QE. So once the Federal Reserve was installed, and I have all those links to Fraser, they're actually pretty interesting, which is the early books of the Federal Reserve. So you could see how they inflated the money supply by almost 2.5 times, which is why when you look at their purchasing power graphs, you see in the first 7 years of their existence where the value, the purchasing power value of the dollar declined about 50%. Well, it was because of all that new money that they printed. And here's a similarity between then and now, which is, where did that money, that all that new money go that they printed? Where does all this new QE money go that they create? It goes first into the private banks, and then the banks loan it out. So, you know, here's another parallel. Stock market went to all-time highs. Real estate market went to all-time highs. maybe not so much bonds, they did drop them down to zero for an extended period of time back in 33. So, and today it's the same thing, but we've got leverage on top of leverage on top of leverage. So everything old is new again, you know, or what is it? Everything new is old again. One of those statements. You got to understand what happened historically to understand where we are today and what is the most likely next outcome. And frankly, I think the IMF, I mean, a lot of it is super gobbledygook, but some of their plans are pretty darn simple to understand and for anybody, I think, really to understand. They just have to read them, which of course most people don't,
Right.
But I do. I'm kind of nerdy like that.
Yeah, and you're getting ready to do like a video series about some new information from the IMF. Is that correct?
Absolutely. But yeah, that's pretty much of a constant. So many topics, so little time.
What I was going to ask real quick is, do you think that there would ever be a possibility of a gold confiscation, like another executive order taking place again in the future?
Well, I personally think that that is a high probability because it happened in this country 3 times historically. And, you know, there's a lot of precedents for it. And they put in that act, I have the number of it, but in 2012, there was an act that was passed where the government has the right to confiscate everything. Your home, your food, your automobile, your labor, your gold,
look into that.
silver, everything. And that was 2012. So do I think that that's going to happen again? Personally, yeah. And you know, a lot of people will say, oh, she just wants to sell those high-priced numismatic coins. Here's the thing. We all have to go by life experiences. And when I tell you that I started in 1964, I was 10 at that time. And my uncle was a major antique dealer. And I don't know why I even paid a lot of attention to this, but it's something that stuck in my head. I was at his house with my parents and we were in a back bedroom and he had 2 huge floor safes. And he opened those doors and he said to my parents, if anything ever happens to me, Aunt Bertie will be well taken care of for the rest of her life because of this. Now, I had no comprehension at 10 how much even that was. But now with this experience, if I had to guess, my bet would be that there were easily, and you couldn't fit one more gold coin in there, but easily 3 monster boxes per safe.
That was a smart man.
100 ounces per safe. That's 3,000 ounces of gold. Pre-33, when it was illegal to hold more than 5 ounces in any other form but that form that he held.
He's a smart man.
Pardon?
He's a smart man.
He's very smart. And what that also means is because he had the kind of legal gold that you could hold, you could also utilize it legally in the marketplace. So I mean, that is an experience of mine. And I'm not going to go, because he got to do that and I will be able to do it too. And I always like to look at what if I'm right and what if I'm wrong. And if there's something that I can do where it doesn't matter whether or not I'm right or wrong, rock and roll hoochie coo all day long. And my feeling on that is that if I can emulate the guys that are in power, I'd love to have their retirement plan. I'd love to have their medical plan. Well, that's not an option that's open to me. But I can look in the ultra rarities and I can see that those elite are holding a lot of these collectible coins. And I can emulate that. I don't have to spend $1 million on 1 ounce of gold. I could do it way below its true value. And then it doesn't matter if they do a confiscation or they don't do a confiscation. I'm buying it so cheap, I don't really care. It doesn't impact me negatively. But if they do a confiscation and I'm sitting with the only kind of gold that you can actually legally hold and legally utilize in the normal marketplace, what kind of premium do you think that might hold?
Right. No, I agree. I agree. And your strategies are excellent. I mean, I definitely want to get into ITM trading here in a moment. What I want to also ask you before we do get into that is, can you talk to us a little bit about what's going on with nations like China and Russia, the BRICS banks nations, and their goal for de-dollarization?
Oh, well, you know, I mean, they really have put in place, and this has been happening actually since 2005. Russia came out and said, you will no longer value any of our assets in terms of dollars. Probably should back up here to move forward a little bit.
Okay.
The US dollar has the status of the world reserve currency,
Right.
which meant it's no longer true. But it's supposed to mean that if you are a country, a corporation, a government, a corporation, or an individual going outside of your borders to buy anything, you had no other alternative but to do so with US dollars. So that created a market for dollars.
Right.
A huge advantage. So, but we're abusing that power. Of course we're abusing that power, and we're pissing everybody off. So countries, particularly in 2002, the U.S. no longer sold enough treasury bonds to fund the government spending. That was December, I think, 23rd was the first time that the Federal Reserve began to buy U.S. treasury bonds. Up to that point, everybody else bought enough. So this is not something that just happened. It's something that evolves. 2005, Russia said, no, 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 you're not going to value any of our assets in terms of dollars anymore. From here forward, it will be euros, rubles, or gold. So that was really the death knell, because that's really what Iraq tried to do when they wanted to value their oil in terms of other currencies and no longer in dollars. But Iraq was small enough for us to just go in and annihilate them. Russia, we couldn't do that with. So that was really, I think, the death knell, my personal opinion, the death knell on the dollar. And then, of course, we go into the crisis. And, of course, keep in mind that the euro was created to, you know, be a reserve currency and take over for the dollar. Well, that's not going to happen.
Right.
And so, essentially, we've been, especially since the crisis, China was the first one that I heard say, ooh, what about the IMF's SDR? SDR stands for special drawing rights. It's just a name.
Well, that is technically the first created digital currency too. I think it was 1969
Yes.
The SDR was created. So that would be the birth of some of the things that I'm into and my viewers are into as well.
Yes, exactly. That was the first digital currency. And then, but it kind of was sleeping all that time until the crisis, and Russia and China goes, oh, what about the SDR? And I thought, wow, they don't have to recreate the wheel. They already have one in place. And then I saw them testing all of their old mechanisms and injecting massive amounts of SDRs on a global basis and doing all sorts of things. So I think that is the direction that we're going in. China was included in the SDR on October 1st of 2016, their yuan, even though they didn't meet all of the criteria.
Right.
So that we let them into the World Organization, the WEO, back in 2000 or 2002. They didn't meet all the criteria, but we let them in anyway. Same thing happened with the SDR. So China really, I mean, let's face it, they want the power. So China, Russia, India, there's along the Silk Road, all of those countries and more are accumulating more gold than since the World Gold Council started to track how much gold central banks were buying. And I'm not even sure that I absolutely believe all of their numbers. So they probably have accumulated a whole lot more than that, but it's really simple. Whoever holds purchasing power into this crisis holds the power.
Oh, I agree. I agree. Did you hear about Iran announcing that they're going to be doing a gold-backed cryptocurrency that, as far as I can tell, is designed to kind of evade U.S. sanctions? Have you heard about
Well,
that?
Iran's been doing a lot of things. I hadn't actually heard that, but I will, Megan, mark it down. I will take a look at that.
I thought it was interesting because it's kind of goes into what we're talking about with de-dollarization. I mean, there's countries are trying to find lots of ways to avoid these sanctions that the U.S. is creating, and and they're being successful with it.
They're being very successful with a lot, even with our allies. It's one thing for Russia and China to do a workaround with Iran. It's another thing for the European Union, the EU, and India, who are supposed to be our allies, to come up with workarounds so they can keep doing business with Iran. And that's exactly what they're doing. But here, I would have to look at that, because here's the thing about backing a currency with gold. It fixes whatever your debt issues are. It creates restrictions on what you can do. So typically, before they go and actually back a currency with gold, they gotta hyperinflate all their debt away. Well, Iran is inside of a massive level of hyperinflation right now.
Right.
So I'd have to take a look at that, but that once you do it, your debt is fixed. So if you can't pay your debt, you got to get rid of it first and then do a gold-backed currency.
Okay. That's cool. Yeah, I was just wondering if you had heard about it, because I thought it was really interesting. Kind of goes into
and see how they're doing.
Dollarization, death of the dollar.
And when they say a gold-backed currency, does that mean that they're going to be? And this is what I would want to look at. Can they convert those? Let's not the dinar, whatever their currency is,
right,
into gold. Take possession of that gold.
All I know right now is the central bank of Iran, the CBI, has made this announcement. It's been approved, and that's the most I know. I don't think there's been much more information.
Yeah, well, I'll look at the details of it. That would be interesting.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, they have to.
Well,
they've been trading with Venezuela and, oh no, that's Turkey. Venezuela and Turkey have been trading gold. I mean, there are ways around the sanctions, and shockingly not. Gold is a big key because it's money, it's global money, and it's peer-to-peer. And in fact, when you look, have you looked at the Bank for International Settlements money flower?
I haven't.
Oh, it's really interesting.
Actually, no, I think I know what you're talking about. I have seen it in your videos.
Yes, yes, yes. And they have space in there for digital currencies, as well as cryptocurrencies, as well as permissionless cryptocurrencies. And they've got a little space that is it universal? No, it's peer-to-peer, but I'm thinking of the graph in my head. It is peer-to-peer, but it is not universal. The only money in their money flower that is both universally accepted and peer-to-peer is commodity money, which is physical gold and silver. And even in the permissionless, that's a much bigger space. It's a much bigger space.
And I definitely encourage people to, especially people who view my videos, to definitely diversify into things like precious metal and silvers. So that kind of gives us an opportunity to talk about ITM trading, because we definitely got to plug ITM. Can you want to talk a little bit about what ITM trading is and what you do there to try to help others?
Oh, absolutely. I've been here since 2002. But having studied currency since 1987, before I even came here, I actually set up a strategy for myself based upon historical repeating patterns, because history always repeats itself. And so everybody, all of our precious metals consultants, they're really strategy specialists. And what we do is we like to work with individuals to create a personal strategy where basically it's the same one that I've done for myself, but tweaked to your goals, your circumstances, and what you have to work with. And that can vary from person to person. So we're very hands-on. We like the human contact. We do. We like to have conversations so that we can really help people. But that is our mission, to help them not just survive what we're going through, but even thrive through, so that on the other side, you're better off than you were when you went into it.
Yeah, and I love your motto: food, water, energy, security, community, barterability, and wealth preservation. And the community factor is what I think ties together a lot of people's ability to survive and thrive through this coming hyperinflation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, when you stop and you think about those things, isn't that what we need all the time?
Yeah, I would see. There's something I talk about called practice change. I got the quote from Gandhi where it talks about being the change that you want to see in this world. So that's what I try to do, and that's what I try to do and encourage others to do, is to be the change, because a lot of people complain about things they don't like. But it's time that we start doing things. It's time that we start evolving. We start becoming human again and start loving each other and treating people as we want to be treated. And the community factor should come into play automatically.
Community is, you know, I mean, really, if I had to look at each one of those things, if you said to me, well, what do you think is the single most important factor? It is that community, because we're going to need to pull together and help each other through this, you know. And I converted my entire, I actually upsized when I saw that this was happening now. I upsized and I converted my entire, because I was in a little teeny condo. Now I'm in a huge house. But for that community reason, and also I've converted my entire property into an urban farm, because food is the single biggest issue. Look at Venezuela. It is the single biggest issue for people as they're going through these resets. So initially, I just, I said, well, I want to make sure my children and my siblings can eat. I have a fairly large family, so that I was like 20 people. And I was not a gardener. I did not really, believe me.
Didn't you converted your swimming pool into a garden, didn't you?
I sure did. I converted it into a pond. So, and I really did that because I didn't want to drink chemicals. So yes, I have to, filter the water, but there's no chemicals. And all of the fish, I can grow more food in the bogs. Harder to do on the islands because it's harder to, so I just do that for pretty because it's hard to harvest. But absolutely, yes. And was frankly, even though I did it for, good water, best darn thing I've done. I can't even begin to tell you how much I enjoy that. So if any of you have a pool, convert it to a swimming pond, put fish in there. I even have wild mallards that came. They enjoyed it so much that they laid a nest in my gardens, and now I have these gorgeous 8 ducks. I love them. I love them so much I can't even tell you.
I can tell you're so excited about it.
Oh, God. I have breakfast with them every morning. And I always go out and say goodnight and feed them when I go to bed. So that's my little community. And I bet you they'd attack you if anybody tried to hurt me. I bet they'd defend me.
Well, Lynette, I always appreciate your time. Is there anything that you want to include before we wrap things up?
Well, I would, yeah. I want people to know, and I did a video on this a couple of weeks ago, that the bond market, the yield curve inversion, which is all kind of technical, but you should go and just watch the video, is telling us that either the next recession is imminent or it is already here and we don't know it yet. And that's my bet, is that second one. So we are running out of time to get ready. So I encourage everybody to kind of take a look at where you're at with that food, water, energy, and all of that, and see where you feel most vulnerable and get those holes filled. and get them done quickly while we still can. We don't have all the time in the world. And I think our time is really, 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 really short. So yeah, I want people to know that for sure.
I agree, and that's great advice. And you definitely do a great job at trying to teach others and educate others and translate that noise that we're being broadcasted. I do want to
encourage. But not true. If everything's so great, why couldn't they raise rates? Why couldn't they run off their balance sheets if everything is so great?
Right. Well, in our media here in the United States are not talking about things like this, which is the reason why I wanted to interview you and have you break down some things on a simple level so people can have a better understanding of what our government and what our media is not telling us.
Watch the report that I'm doing on the IMF. Normally, I try and keep it to 5 slides, and this one is 10 because I just couldn't cut more. Because their words, what they have in mind for you. And I can't say it. Well, I'm not fond of those people. I'll say that.
I'm not fond, and most of my viewers are not fond either. So you're in good company.
Yeah.
I assure you. But I definitely want to encourage everybody to make sure you're checking out Lynette Zang, checking out ITM Trading's website and their YouTube channel, which I'm going to have links for down below. If this happens,
or call us for a conversation.
Yeah.
888-696-4653. We're kind of a little, in that regard, we're old school. We believe in relationship. It's part of the community.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And if this is your first time, ladies and gentlemen, ever checking out any of my content, I do encourage you to explore my channel. And if you like what I'm doing, you can support me by subscribing, liking, commenting, and sharing. And as always, I encourage everybody to be the change by practicing change. And I love you all.